Give us the elevator pitch. You've got several candidates left. What is Bernie Sanders' unique pitch to say, I should be the president of the United States, that's different from anybody up on that stage?
Well, if you want a candidate who has consistently for decades stood up for working people and middle-class people in this country, who has never wavered, who has never worked at a big corporation or represented a big corporation or carried their water in the Congress, who has always stood by the little guy, if that's the kind of candidate you want in the White House who's going to stand up for priorities that make sense to working families, Bernie Sanders is your candidate.
Is Bernie Sanders essentially a big government candidate? Because a lot of his programs look like they'd be pretty expensive and would take a lot of resources and would turn over more control to the federal government in various respects, including with Medicare, but not just with Medicare. We talked with Mike Braun, he's the Republican senator from Indiana yesterday, and he warned about the deficit that we're running up. This is what he said.
Thank goodness we're the only reserve currency, so we're able to pay for all this largesse by borrowing $1 trillion a year, throwing it on our kids and grandkids. Those chickens will come home to roost when we completely deplete the Medicare trust fund here in 6 years. Or if some other countries start to become places where people want to park their capital.
So is that of concern to the American people, to the voters, Mr. Weaver, in your estimation? And is it of concern to Bernie Sanders how much debt we're running up that our kids and our grandkids will have to pay off?
Absolutely, and that's why he pays for every single program that he has put forward. Let's be clear, the wealthy and large corporations have gotten huge tax cuts over the last many years. If they were paying their fair share of taxes, this deficit would start to go away. All of these foreign wars that we have had, the longest war in American history in the Middle East now, that's incredibly expensive, all supported by Republicans. So, these Republicans, so-called deficit hawks, they're really not deficit hawks. What they want to do is they want to shrink those elements of government which help working class people and middle class people. So Bernie Sanders pays for everything he advocates for. You say he's big government. I say he's a smart government candidate because he wants to make sure that the American people have a standard of living that is commensurate with the wealth of this country.
One of the things he said last night on the debate stage was that we should rethink the war on terror. We should have a different approach. You mentioned foreign wars that we've been involved in. Do you know what that rethinking would be? What would be the different approach from what we've taken so far?
Well, look, we need a foreign policy that brings countries together, that does not rely on endless perpetual warfare to get America's foreign policy goals achieved. The current president, obviously, as we have seen, is being ridiculed by other foreign leaders. He has a very divisive foreign policy. He coddles dictators around the world. We need a president who's going to have the respect of foreign leaders, who's going to bring countries together to not only deal with issues like terrorism, but also to deal with what is probably the greatest threat to the planet, which is global climate change. So that's the kind of leadership that you would get from a Bernie Sanders, somebody who wants to bring people together. And that's true not just abroad, but also here in the United States. We have a very divisive administration now, which peddles in hate and division, and that has to stop in order for our country to move forward.